Hi, it's Professor Monty. Let's look at expressions in the form the square root of a squared. Okay, it begs the question, is the square root of a squared just a? Well, let's look. So I've got a couple examples. If a is 3, well, the square root of 3 squared is the square root of 9, which is equal to 3. It works. 3 was squared, my answer is 3. A was squared, my answer is a. So yes, for a equals 3, it works. Well, let's check a equals negative 3. So I've got the square root of negative 3 squared. Well, negative 3 squared is 9. But remember, the principal square root of 9 is just a non-negative root, which is 3, which is not what we started out with. I put in negative 3, but I got out positive 3. That one didn't work. So this isn't the case. So we would say no. Well, again, that begs the question, what is the answer? Well, it has to be the positive number. Because once I square it, it becomes positive, and then the square root is just going to be the positive root. So we would say, oh, the square root, let's put it over here. The square root of a squared does come out with that number. We had a 3, we'll call it a, but it has to be positive. So it's the absolute value of a. That's what the square root of a squared is. Okay, so let's look at some examples. If I have the square root of 100x squared, well, I'm looking for something squared that is 100x squared. And what's going to work? Well, 10x. So 10x is my answer, but it has to be the absolute value of 10x. That's my answer, the absolute value of 10x. Now, notice the absolute value of 10 is just 10. So if you want to, you could say the answer is 10 times the absolute value of x. I don't know which way your teacher wants it. I would accept either of these. This one's more simplified, but this isn't wrong by any stretch of the imagination. I'm going to box this one because that would be my final answer. I can't go further than that. All right, let's try this one. Again, I have the square and the square root. They cancel out. I'm just going to get this a minus 4, but I'm going to get the absolute value. Again, that's my answer. I'm going to box it. Absolute value of a minus 4 is what this simplifies to. And so it's a pretty simple idea. The square root and the square cancel out, but you have to have the absolute value. All right, let's do another one. Now this one, again, I'm looking for something squared that's x to the 14th. Oh, that's x to the 7th, because remember, a power to a power, you multiply the exponents. So my answer is x to the 7th. Again, absolute value. Now, you may think, oh, we always use the absolute value, but let me show you one where we don't have to. The absolute value of x to the 8th. Notice what squared is x to the 8th? Oh, that's x to the 4th. So we could say the absolute value of x to the 4th. But in this case, we don't have to, because x to the 4th, when we raise it to an even power, it's always going to become non-negative anyway, 0 or positive. So in this case, we can actually leave it as x to the 4th. Okay. When is it that we have to use the absolute value and when don't we? Well, if we start with an even power, 2, and we end with an odd power, 1, we need the absolute value. You don't need it for the numbers. We started with an even power, ended with an odd power, 1. We started with an even power, ended with an odd power. But if we start with an even power and end with an even power, we don't need the absolute value. So let's say something like this. Even power to odd power need absolute value. All right, that's the idea. Hope that helps. We're going to get to the point where they're going to say, hey, in the instructions, assume none of these were negative numbers to begin with, and then at some points we won't need these absolute values. But for now, or if we don't know if the variable is positive or negative, then we're going to need to go that way. All right, hope that helps. Just takes a little bit of practice.